This is the Tilbury water pipe whistle in D. It was handmade by Chuck Tilbury and is one of his first few original ones working with CPVC. Up till that point, as far as I know, he had made metal whistles out of copper and other materials. I haven't actually spoken to him since we talked about this whistle. I'm not sure he's actually making whistles anymore, so this might be kind of a 3 or 4 of a kind special deal. The pros of this whistle are that CPVC is a very durable material, rather like ABS. It's impervious to water, weather, temperature. Now if you look at the blade there, you can see that it's kind of crooked and there's a little nick in it. Like I said, this was handmade, and that is probably just a spot where Chuck got a little too heavy with the file that he used to carve out this windway. If you have really small lungs, this whistle would be for you. It has a lot of back pressure, and unfortunately for someone like myself who's used to playing whistles that require a bit more air, it's tremendously easy to overblow this whistle, including into the third octave when you think you're trying to play the second octave. It's also super difficult to hit the bell note in a hurry because it's very easy to go there without, I mean, it's just a small change in push. I think it's generally an attractive whistle. He made it with a nice Delrin block. The brass collar is neat. When it comes to the cons of this whistle, though, there are several. This was a prototype. What Chuck had told me at the time was that he had wanted to start making CPVC whistles that were less expensive, cost him less to make, and would be a little more accessible to newer players. It's also out of tune. Instead of A being 440, this one sounds more like 430, 432. One of the other players that got one of these prototypes and I talked about it, and when we first got these, which we were just sort of picked by lottery from people that had responded to Chuck's call, we thought it was meant to be like a Baroque tuning 415 or something like that, because it's a little flat. It's completely in tune with itself, and it's not so far out that it sounds super weird, but it's enough to notice. And I remember addressing that with Chuck and sending him a link to a video I did with it, and he was kind of incredulous. I don't know if it's because of the bore versus barrel thickness or maybe some other calculation that went a little awry, because from what I understand, Chuck was using his usual tuning standard that he used to space and size the holes for the metal whistles he was making. So it was kind of an interesting experiment for Chuck, I think. And this was a learning experience for him, and also for me, because I've made some of my own whistles since then. And there were a couple things maybe that I learned to do and not to do just from having this whistle in my hands. One of the cons is actually this attractive brass collar. It makes for a nice little windway, but it also makes it kind of difficult at times to get your lips positioned correctly to not impede your own airflow. It also is subject to temperature and humidity, and I've found that the windway on this whistle tends to clog with saliva a lot more quickly and readily than with other whistles that I have. It looks cool, but it's kind of self-defeating, and it's kind of backward from what really works with whistles. It's actually better to have the plastic around the mouthpiece and the body to be metal, because the plastic part will gather less condensation and less spit. It's also not a very loud whistle, which is good for some. It's not necessarily great for me, but I think it sounds pretty good. I think once you get used to really dialing back the air pressure, it's not super hard to play. You do have to either do the thing where you put some dish soap or some kind of other solution on this windway, or it's going to clog up between tunes. At least it makes it hard for me to get through passages in tunes, because there will be a nice little drop of spit that'll form right in the middle of the windway, and then it'll make the notes go shrieky or weird. I can't really speak to Chuck's other metal whistles. I haven't had a chance to get one of those in my hand, and I should try and reach out to Chuck and see if he's even still making them, because when I looked at his website, it's not really in service anymore. So I don't know if Chuck decided to retire or moved shop and didn't necessarily change his online presence, but I will attempt to reach him in the future, and who knows, if he is still making, maybe I'll end up with one of his metal whistles, and that'll be a different video. As for this one though, I really love the idea of it. I love that Chuck was willing to experiment and also willing to send me this whistle to try out and use, and I actually have recorded it. But for reasons I've mentioned, it's not ideal. Is it a good beginner whistle? Kind of. I mean, yes and no. The difficulty with such little air pressure would make it hard for a beginner to nail down the bell note or these last two notes, because it's very gentle breath required. And I think beginners have a tendency to overblow notes and cause shrieks in between fingerings anyway. And so a setup like this is going to make that more difficult to handle. However, I think if you can get beyond that, and I think if you can dip the head so that you're not getting those condensation spit buildup issues, it is actually kind of easy to play. And I've played this whistle in the bathtub. There's nothing going to happen to it. It's water pipe. With a couple of issues addressed, this really could have been a great beginner whistle. And Chuck, if you're out there and you see this video and you're still making whistles, I think you were on to a really good thing here. I'd really like to know if you have tried more of these or if you're still making your metal whistles. It's fun, and it's been fun to be part of Mr. Tilbury's water pipe D whistle experiment. It's a really neat thing to have. Someone who really practices with this whistle could make a lot out of it. That was Chuck Tilbury's CPVC water pipe D whistle. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week when we play something completely different.